Hi, welcome to the Nintendo Quest panel. I am Rob McCallum, writer-director of Nintendo Quest, and I'm joined by Mr. Glenn Stanway here, who is a producer and all things utility guy for the film and everything we do.
Hello.
How many people have seen Nintendo Quest here, or have heard of it? Okay,
I see some familiar faces.
This is great. This is awesome.
The guy who's glad we didn't do media has seen it. That's fantastic.
Yeah. Well, what we're going to do with this panel is kind of talk about how it all started, where it's gone, and Glenn has a bunch of questions, and I have no idea what he's got kind of planned, so we'll see where it goes, but because there's so many of us here today, feel free to kind of ask questions whatever you want to know about the film. No questions are off limits. We would love to make this fun.
Yeah,
Glenn, what do you got cooking?
I'm going to go on record as saying any questions you have are going to be infinitely more interesting than anything we could imagine somebody else having, so I'll absolutely back Rob up on that. If you have questions, please feel free to ask.
Yes.
And thanks for being supportive of the film and going to see it and coming to see us and coming in here to hear us talk about the film a little bit more. We really, really do appreciate that. And we know we've got some stiff competition, so we appreciate it. So, Rob, I wanted to start by asking you if you could just talk about sort of the genesis. Oh, I used the bad word. It's a Nintendo film. Talk about the origins of Nintendo Quest a little bit. Where did the idea come from? How did it sort of germinate? How did this film come about?
It was something that came out of necessity. I just finished a sci-fi action-adventure B-movie called Unearthly, and it was very complicated. It was a shoestring budget. We had 400 visual effects, and we had contracted people from around the world to help do that kind of CG. And it was a lot of work for an independent feature, and I did not want to do something similar like that for my next project. So I wanted to do something more manageable, something more contained. So I said, kind of go back to doing documentaries. I'd done a bunch of documentary shorts. And I wanted to do something on collecting. Jay being my best friend for 30 years, video games came right out of his mouth. We should do something on games. But the challenge always was, what kind of documentary can we do on games that's worthy of doing games? That's not a historical examination of video games. What can we do? So after brainstorming a while, it became, why don't we document the collection process from beginning to end? And why would people want to see that? Because for so many collectors, it's their life dream to have that, and it was for Jay, so it just kind of lined up. Let's see if this guy can get his dream. And I can unfortunately only shoot for 30 days, so that's where the 30-day portion came in, but it also psychologically makes a lot of sense. Like if you had a month of your life, how far could you go to getting your dream? So one thing just kind of led to another, and it lined up.
So obviously Jay's your best friend, and you've talked about that a little bit. You guys have known each other for most of your lives. So it's one thing for you knowing Jay. Mm-hmm. The question I had for you was, what made you think that Jay would be a compelling subject for a documentary? Like, what made you feel like he was somebody who would be interesting to watch for 90 minutes?
Well, he's an interesting guy. For this film, this is all about getting out of your comfort zone. And Jay's a guy, or at least he was, that very much liked his routines. He liked things a certain way, he liked to live his day a certain way, and this film instantly plucks him from that safety zone and drops him in a whole other world that he's unfamiliar with, that's unpredictable, that he can't control and harness. He has to go with the flow. And that's what it takes for him to accomplish his dream. So as a filmmaker, I thought, this guy's gonna be perfect, because we're going to kind of get to see what he's like in a ticking time bomb situation for 30 days. How is he going to adjust to that? Which was hard as a friend, because it's like, this is kind of painful to watch, but this is fascinating as well. And I think those of you that have seen it know that Jay's a different person from where he starts to where he ends. And that's always kind of what we wanted to do as a filmmaker, show that transformation process. So Jay was always a great candidate for that.
You've talked about wanting to make a film that focused on the act of collecting, and collecting from start to finish, and the community around collecting. When you were conceptualizing the film, what was the message you felt you wanted to deliver about the collecting community and about collecting as a hobby?
That it actually is a community and not just a group of people who all have these individual goals, that we can, come together to help people achieve what they're looking for if you have the guts and courage to ask for help. It's not an individually focused mission. So when Jay announced, pretty much via Kickstarter, that I'm gonna go and try to get my goal, there was definitely some backlash, but there was also a lot more voices saying, we wanna help you do that? How can we help? And that just shows the strength of the community. The games are great, and we say this all the time. The games are like the glue that bring us together and kind of keep us together, but it's the people that matter. It's the people in this world that make it worthwhile. And I think anybody that's had like a kind of a crummy job where you don't like what you're doing, but the people that you work with make it worthwhile, same kind of thing for collecting and the people that in the community. You know, it's all about the people.
Obviously, a film called Nintendo Quest spends a lot of time on Nintendo as a subject, but for you personally, what's your answer to this question? Why do you feel Nintendo is a cultural touchstone? Like, why do you feel
What's my answer?
Yeah.
Nintendo did
The film
so
is
much.
obviously your answer in a lot of ways.
Yeah, the film answers a lot. It's very much what I think and what I believe, and a lot of people also agree, but you know, Nintendo resuscitated, you know, an industry that was on life support. I think the NES is one of the big reasons that we have the industry that we have it today, good and bad, for the sake of the industry where we are now. But there may not have been video gaming if it wasn't for the NES. It may have died out like other trends that we saw. And the way that Nintendo did gaming and their approach to universally appealing games, their sense of storytelling that emerged in the NES era, like full-on narratives that weren't just games that force you to get a better high score, even though there were some of those on the library still. They put you in control of a character who had this sprawling mission, this context where you as a player could identify, and that connection surpassed that which we have when we watch TVs and movies. You know, we watch movies, it's like, oh, that's cool to kind of do that. We live vicariously through those characters. But when we play a game, we just lost a third of our audience. When we play a game, we are that character. So that connection is that much stronger. And it has a profound effect. And I think we've all probably played a game where it's like, wow, this means something more than me just killing an hour or 2 or 5 minutes. There's something strong about this that resonates and speaks to me personally. And Nintendo does that a lot for me. And so many other people.
So again, the documentary focuses...
It's called Nintendo Quest.
It is called Nintendo Quest. It is a quest involving Nintendo. Not a trek or an adventure, but a quest.
Or a journey, but a quest.
Or a journey. So Jay's a big subject of the documentary in terms of his journey and his personal story.
Yes.
Nintendo's obviously a subject of the documentary. Collecting, community, these are all aspects of the documentary. Can you talk a little bit about balancing the focus between Jay's story?
Yeah, because
the story you wanted to tell about Nintendo. This is a question I had myself.
Yeah, Glenn, as much as he's associated with the project now, was mainly just a person who appeared on camera until we had actually finished the film, and then he started becoming a producer of all things after the fact to keep giving the film life. So I know one of the questions he had is, how are these guys going to balance this one-man story, personal journey, and yet still talk about the culture of Nintendo and the legacy? And that really came and was informed by what happened with Jay. Like, what are the best moments that happened on Jay's journey? What did we want to talk about as Jay's journey expands? So as Jay would go out there, we would find when we just talked to people like casually after shooting, this is what we're talking about. So like, oh, wait a second, that should be a segment. Wouldn't it be cool if it went here after some of the stuff that happened the day of? So you cut down all the best of Jay's stuff, all the people that he meets, and when he finds the cool games and the stories that are attached to that and how that affects him. But then you bookend that with talk and discussion of the culture, the legacy, and it all kind of goes hand in hand and supports one another. It was a balancing act. It was hard.
I imagine it was, which is why I was curious about it. And the other thing I'm curious about is, did you find that focus shifted from the beginning of the film to the end? Did you envision something different when you started?
Yes, very much so. I thought it would be much more 80-20 discussion with industry people and 20% Jay's story. But then after seeing what Jay went through on this, it slowly became 50-50 while filming, and then 80-20 in favor of Jay by the time it all played out, because what happens to Jay is so much more powerful than any kind of surface discussion that we could only get into the film. The film talks about a lot of interesting things, but because it's 90 minutes, we can't get deep enough to make a point that is definitive. So instead we decided we're going to bring up these topics, leave it as surface discussions, and just kind of, poke the bear with the debate. Digital, physical, this is an ongoing thing that people should be kind of concerned of. But let's get back to Jay, because that is a definitive story worth exploring.
I think that's really interesting too, because I know for me, I think that someone's enjoyment of the film or their opinion of the film really hinges upon them caring about Jay and caring about what happens to him. And what's interesting about that to me is that what you were talking about making initially sounds like it's maybe a little bit more conventional as a game documentary goes.
Yeah, I mean, and the nice thing with the documentary is it's not a script like a narrative film or like, you know, what we call like Hollywood cinema, right? It's not a set story, so you have that flexibility. Again, something that was born out of the previous film I had done where I was locked into telling this story this way, and in post I was like, man, I wish I would have wrote that scene differently, but because I'm now handcuffed to it. A documentary, it finds its legs, or the story comes together while you're editing it, because then you have all the pieces on the table, and you can start building that puzzle. Yeah, it was hard, man. It was very hard to figure that out.
So many of the people who are with us in the room today have seen the film already, and they've gotten a sense of what Jay had to go through and some of the obstacles he ran into. So what I'd like you to share with everybody is, what's the single best kind of behind-the-scenes story from the Nintendo Quest shoot? What's one of the wacky or screwy things that happened that didn't make it into the film?
There's a lot that we talk about on the podcast. We talk about running out of gas, driving out of Texas, and what that was like, and how thankfully, you know, the gods of fortune, you know, smiled on us and got us to a gas station. We talk about the tricky situation with Ben Gold leading us to these strangers who thought they had like lottery gold in terms of NES and thought we'd pay them $30,000 for their box of cards that were worth $30. But honestly, the wackiest stuff was seeing Jay go through the swings of pressure, starting the day, getting psyched up and having that anxiety in him, like trying to control that, and then afterwards just like watching him decompress up and down, and watching him change in those moments and what it did to him as a person and how it wore on him. And I don't know if that's like the anecdote you're looking for, but that's the most interesting stuff that I wish we could have captured. But Jay's was, and still is to some degree, a really guarded guy. When the cameras are on, it's like, wait a second, people are watching me. So tricking him out of that became hard, and slowly he got worn down by the sheer marathon that the film became. And those colors shine through.
I think even an anecdote of that I can think of just from this weekend is Jay isn't with us because he had to start his trip back home to London, Ontario, and that's a 36-hour drive. So trying to work out the travel time was a huge thing.
And for those of you that have seen the film, you know why he's driving.
But he spent a pretty good chunk of this weekend basically fretting over when to leave, when not to leave, what to do, what not to do, and that's a really small example of kind of what we're talking about.
He's worried about losing his job. He was set to leave tomorrow and get back just in time, but his boss was on his case, and he's like, I just got to go now. The anxiety levels were just peaking. I'm like, well, it's your job. You got to go, man. I'd love to have you at the panel. I'd love to have you at the con, but you know that's going to be gone, and you need your job. You need your job, Jay. So. But just that stress of disappointing us is like something that he went through in the film. Are people that watch the movie going to be disappointed in his actions? Was one thing that constantly came up. Are people going to find this interesting? Are people going to find me interesting? Are we doing it the right way? Am I entertaining enough? I'm just like, just be yourself. Trust me. The human condition over the course of what we're doing will be significant and important, which is always better than being entertaining.
Agreed. Hi, ladies. Well, thank you for joining us. I wanted to ask you a little bit about, I want to touch back on community for a second. So
sure.
Nintendo Quest obviously is about community in a lot of ways. What I'm curious about is you crowdfunded the development of Nintendo Quest, or at least part of the development of Nintendo Quest. So you used Kickstarter. We had a couple of Kickstarter campaigns for Nintendo Quest, and I'm curious about whether or not your experience with crowdsourcing the development of the film had an impact on the way you felt you needed to show community in the film as well. Like, I wonder if those things informed each other at all. I hope that made sense.
Sort of, but not really.
Do you feel like you learned anything more about community through crowdsourcing than maybe you had from the perspective you went into the film with?
I think that Kickstarter taught me and us that being transparent and keeping the lines of communication open as much as possible is your greatest skill and your asset. don't close people away, don't kind of shut people off, and don't try to be like above people when it's easier to open your arms and bring them in with you. Whether that's a rallying call, like something like Kickstarter, like let's go to the goal, guys, come on, let's try to do it. Or just like, here we are on our adventure, who wants to help? Because things are always better with people than by yourself. And there's enough gatekeepers in the world, whether it's in the world of gaming or other things, where people say, no, you have to do things this way, or you need our permission to do that. We're not like that. We want to include everybody. We believe everybody's got a great story to tell, and we value who every person is. And if you want to be a part of us, all you got to do is reach out to us. Email, Facebook, whatever. We will talk to you because we want to count you as part of us.
Out of curiosity, do we have any Kickstarter backers in here with us today? No? That's okay. I was just curious. We like to thank those people whenever we meet them, and we've been lucky enough to meet many of them. So, what was the biggest thing about the community that surprised you in the making of Nintendo Quest?
How many people, without questioning, wanted to support both the film and Jay's journey. Like, unquestionably, just say, yes, how can we help? What do you want? What do you need? Let's do this. We want to be a part of this. This is special to us. And didn't even ask questions, didn't ask us to explain, didn't question our motivations. Because we are who we are, and again, being transparent about what we want and what we believe, people buy into that. Because we're that genuine and sincere. They want to be a part of that. And they want to be a part of someone's story who's going for their dreams, because I think we all want to go for our dreams. We know how important dreams are, yet we'll manufacture excuses at every turn to avoid doing them. Oh, it's too much money. I can't get the time off work. I can't do this. It'll be too hard. I'll never do it, so why start? People, it's infectious when you say that you're going to do something regardless of how crazy it is. The impossible is what makes this film great. Agreed.
Agreed. This is obviously a film about gaming, but you're trying to make it as appealing to as broad an audience as possible. Yeah. So my next question was, what do you feel that average person, that potential non-gamer who's going to see Nintendo Quest, what do you think is most important for them to know about the gaming community or the collecting community?
That it's out there, that it's not just a nostalgic fad that that people are obsessed with this because they grew up with this when they were kids. We talk to a lot of children that play the NES and like the Master System and Genesis, and they don't want a PS4 for Christmas because those games speak to them more, and it's not their parents. Like, their parents aren't those gamers from 30 years ago. They're just what I'd call just regular mom and dads that, okay, well, I guess if you want an NES, yeah, let's do that. Let's have fun with that. And I think it's easier for some parents to understand why something like the NES 30 years ago is maybe a little bit more wholesome than some of the offerings today. And that's why they can get behind that. And plus, I think mom and dad can play those games with a little bit more ease than some of the controllers today that require 45 button combinations in your foot to pull things off. So there's that too. So yeah, I think the film kind of just says, look, this is a big thing, it's out there, it's not just this guy's weird goal. This is a whole thing that exists, and this is how big it is.
How does the completed version of Nintendo Quest measure up to what your original vision for the film was?
Oh man, what a good question.
How do you feel about your own film, Rob?
Oh, don't ask me that. That's a good question. It's the creator's conundrum, right? There's a whole bunch of, I wish we could have, I wish this was in there, I wish this thing that we did was better or different. Like, with complete transparency, I wish we had a lot more female voices in the film, because one of the aspects about the NES is that it's a universally appealing system. It's not male-driven kind of gameplay. It's for everyone. Those games are universal and appeal to everyone, And I don't think our film does an accurate job of representing that fan base, unfortunately. So that would be like a huge knock I'd throw against the film. But as far as overall, you couldn't write what happened to Jay on paper if you wanted. So seeing the things that happened and having it compiled in that 92-minute film is way beyond my expectations. And even more than that, seeing the impact of what happened to Jay and who Jay became on other people is priceless.
I have, kind of one more question I want to ask you now. I've got a couple of sort of rapid-fire questions I can ask. Or we have an opportunity for people to ask questions themselves if they would like to. So what I'm going to ask you first is, what do you hope is the message that people take away from Nintendo Quest after they've seen it?
That anything is possible, and you should always go for whatever you believe in, because the journey alone will be worth it regardless of the destination.
It's a good answer.
Thanks.
Is that one before?
No, it's the focus of the film. Every scene in the film points to that, even when we're talking about the legacy stuff. It's all about doing what is impossible. Like James Portnow says in one of the legacy sections, you go into an office today to pitch something like Mario as game development. Nobody's going to greenlight a story about a plumber who jumps on turtles and eats mushrooms. That game does not get greenlit in the industry today. But that's why we should be doing stuff like that, because it is so far out there. Why not? Next question.
Do any of our audience members have any questions they'd like to ask?
Feel free to ask. Even
film?
if you don't know about the film and you want to have questions of clarification.
Even if you've never heard about the film before you set foot in this room.
Even
has
personal
anything he
questions
said piqued your
for
interest?
Glenn or me outside of the actual film. Anything. Okay, next question.
Oh, wait.
Oh,
we have.
So there's been quite a few like classic gaming related films or
Sure.
documentaries. When you guys started doing this, what was the first thought about financing or distribution? How do you start?
You just start. Again, we'll come up with excuses for why we shouldn't do things. I've been a filmmaker for 15 years. This is my second feature film. And if you sit back and look at all the things and roadblocks on paper, you will never get started. So you come up with the premise, and when that premise catches fire, in my brain at least, it pushes me to just overcome everything every step of the way. So financing, the first thing we had, our first Kickstarter campaign that helped us achieve the production. Distribution, those plans started probably around the time we finished shooting. And I think one of your questions might get to that. I know you were toying with that. But it's fine to shoot stuff and you have a film, but then what do you do? With a topic like Nintendo and no Nintendo documentaries out there for whatever reason, distributors were calling us by the time we were in post and doing stuff. So those conversations were happening, and I'll elaborate on that when you get to your lightning round. You just tackle one at a time, and you just keep going, and you use stuff that is out there not as competition but as support. Again, King of Kong, indie game, even Angry Video Game Nerd, even stuff like Pixels. These are all examples of video game culture that are out there, so distributors should be interested in stuff like that. What do those films do so extraordinarily well? How can we do that in our film without copying or like ripping off? But like, what do they do well? Why does that resonate with me? How can we put that vibe in our film? Does that answer your question? Cool.
Anybody else?
Do you guys have any favorite video game themed films, be it documentary or feature?
Sure, I love King of Kong, and I love Indie Game the Movie. Indie Game the Movie is such an awesome study of the creation process from beginning to end. So that was a go-to for me, both stylistically and content-wise. That, again, starting something from scratch and finishing it, and the way that film looks at the human condition under those boiler, pressure kind of situations. That's fantastic, And as I don't know, as a hardcore gamer, it's very fascinating, but also as a filmmaker who creates art, that movie hit home for me. And then King of Kong, really awesome, right? Like David versus Goliath, that's that story. It just happens to be a video game backdrop. And it was cool to have a lot of those people that were in King of Kong appear in our film. So we could bring those giants into David scenario.
I'm going to be boring, but honestly, those would be the first two films that come to mind for me too. I think King of Kong is one of the documentaries that showed me that the documentary can be legitimately entertaining and not just informative. That real life can be as entertaining as anything that could be scripted or written.
I think that's super important, because that's the one rule we had when making Nintendo Quest. This was going to be a fun movie, documentary or not. There's a lot of documentaries in general where people still have that stigma of like this educational 2-hour seminar where we download information and are bored with graphics. It would have been easy for us to do a history lesson, but we wanted to talk about the culture. We wanted this to be fun, like the games Jay's playing. This is Jay's game. How can we make this fun? Fun is so important. There's not enough fun.
Documentaries are tricky because you can't show everything. You've got a 90-minute film or a 2-hour film or whatever the case may be, so you can't be completely honest in terms of showing literally everything from point A to point B. And it still has to hold together under some sort of narrative structure so that somebody who's not familiar with what's going on can just sit there and watch it and understand what's happening. and get involved in it. So, you know, I know that there's certain parts of King of Kong that are, you know, dramatized or at least maybe played up in a certain way on film that are maybe not quite true to how things kind of happen. And it's the same thing with something like Indie Game the movie, but there's still a type of honesty there. And you can watch Indie Game the movie and see these guys and see them as real people struggling to get something that they're passionate about made, and they don't always come across well. And I think that's really, really important. I think it's okay to not like these people all the time.
It's okay to watch people with flaws. You want to root for them to overcome that. So a guy like Phil Fish in Indie Game, the movie, I don't know anything about him, never met him, but he gets a bad rap in the community, right? Because he speaks his mind. Well, now I want to watch him go through that and learn from that process, right? And I think people that watch Nintendo Quest will watch Jay learn from his flaws as they come out in his interactions and what he does to overcome them or understand them at the very least. Which is, you know, again, something universal that we can all take into our account. Films are mirrors held up to reality. You know, we enjoy that reflection and that distance, but we can learn from that image too.
All right, anybody else? Sir.
What games are you guys currently playing right now?
Oh man, great question. I'm dying for XCOM 2 to come out, but I'm playing a lot of Mario Maker. So fun, man. So fun. I just love drawing with the Mario pixels, you know. What are you playing? I'm playing a lot of Super Meat Boy. Funny that we mentioned Indie Game Movie now that it's on PS4, which is great. I'm dying to get into Rocket League as well.
My de facto answer for about a year now has been Destiny.
Nice.
Yeah.
Always and ever Destiny.
With the new purchases?
Yeah.
Oh, even more so with the new purchases. Destiny's such a weird game for me because it's like the best worst game I've ever played. It's so fun, but it's so flawed, but it's such a neat experience because it definitely doesn't feel like it's coming from a place where Bungie's, you know, trying to pull one over on anybody who's playing it. It's not, they didn't release something that seemed a little bit half-baked to be vindictive or anything, and they're learning as much about how to build that game as anybody as they're building it, and seeing how much they're invested in the community and the way the community responds to that game has been amazing, and just how much they support their community and how much the community sorts them back. And honestly, it's at the point where the game isn't even what keeps me coming back at this point, it's the people.
Yeah.
I have met so many amazing people playing that game, and I have so much fun playing with them. It doesn't matter what we're doing. We don't have to be doing anything, and we're still having a blast kind of hanging out playing it. So the community is the real strength of that game, and it's really unique, and it's certainly not the first, you know, online game by any stretch. It's not really a true MMO, but I mean, it's not the first game with those elements either, but something about that game, it's something about the people playing it is a little bit different, and that's been really, really fun to be a part of. So I tend to not play anything else because I want to play in that and it seems like I keep meaning to.
I'm dying to play Tales of Zestiria as well. I'm a huge fan of the Tales saga, Tales of Symphonia, Tales of Xillia, Tales of Destiny, all that. I love that. I love RPGs. Playing Final Fantasy is what made me a filmmaker today, for the original NES. Learning how stories could be told differently. Again, video games not just being a high score marathon, but this overarching world where you're responsible for it and the way that narrative elements play in that made me a filmmaker today. You want to go to your lightning round?
Any other questions? I can move on if not. Still got a few minutes, so. No? That's okay. Okay, so I'm gonna throw a few things at you here, Rob.
The lightning round begins.
Hopefully this will be a quick question. Why did you choose to structure Nintendo Quest the way that you did? Talk to me about the film structure. Why is it built the way it's built?
For maximum payoff. By cutting in and out as fast as we do, we get the best of the best. So, scene with Jay, really high stakes, leaving sometimes a cliffhanger, sometimes a dramatic moment, or something for pure entertainment. In and out, bite-sized morsels, again, to make it game-like. So you're switching and you're playing these different levels, these different stages, so you feel like you're going through a game by being exposed to different worlds and different settings and different characters all the time.
What did you learn about yourself while making Nintendo Quest?
That I constantly aim a little bit higher than what I'm physically and emotionally capable of achieving, and stubborn enough to ignore those signs when I'm in the middle of it. This is a marathon. Like, even just looking at Jay's 30-day thing, we'd get up at 6 or 7 a.m. every day. The crew would have breakfast, we'd get on the road and drive and do basically work until midnight. We'd all get back to the hotel around midnight, and then I'd have to log the footage as an editor and look and see how we shot things, what worked, what didn't work, how to change things, and have those notes with the crew the next morning. So it was like 4 hours of sleep every day for 30 straight days, constantly on the road. A little bit higher than what I'm actually capable of doing, but...
The one thing that's really missing from the film, I think, is the literal hours of driving that somehow, regardless of how the film's editing, there's no way to get across how much time you guys
what a
spend.
12-hour drive is day after day after day, just to keep getting to cities so you can get to a cluster of well-known game stores.
And I wasn't with you when you shot, but I mean, I've been...
But you've been on the
touring film
power
with you,
tour,
and
yeah.
we've had some very similar
Yeah, so we
30-hour drives to Texas with very few stops and 3 guys getting increasingly bored and loopy in a car. And
yeah, for those of you who don't know, we had a 10-city tour across North America with the finished film, which has been awesome, and Portland was the last stop. We had a world premiere in Beverly Hills a couple months ago, so.
how hard was the film to edit?
Hard. Not only finding the balance of setting up those stages and those unique scenarios, but to convey the information that people need to understand what's going on. There's a lot going on. There's Jay, who he is, the rules, and letting people always know where he is in the journey at any given point. And then what about that collection is more interesting than just a ticker tape of numbers increasing? So putting time, to those top 20 games that we do. It's a balancing act of how to communicate as much information as possible. Again, in an entertaining way that you don't feel bogged down with knowing all this essentially exposition. We don't want to bore people by saying, and then this happened, and then this is why you should care about this, and then this is why this is. You have to make, again, bite-sized, digestible chunks of information so that people want to know more and want to learn.
How difficult was it to connect with all the game industry personalities that appear in the film?
Not that hard, actually. Surprisingly not that hard. It started with Facebook messages to people that we wanted to include, and after they talked to us and again saw who we are, sometimes it would take an interview with them. They would be making phone calls on our behalf to other people that we wanted to include as well. They'd say, hey, what else are you looking for in your film? I might know someone who'd be like, well, I would like to talk to Thor Ackerland, who won Nintendo World Championships in 1990. Well, Thor's a good friend, let me call him. Call Thor, and then we would fly to Dallas after the 30-day journey to interview Thor.
That's how you talked to Billy Mitchell too, isn't it?
Billy Mitchell didn't know I was coming. He was at an event at San Diego Comic-Con, and a friend said, he's going to be here. I'm like, but my flight leaves in an hour and a half. Well, he's going to be there. It's like, all right, gotta make it work. If I miss a flight, so be it. I went right to there, and they opened the gates of this restaurant. He came walking out with his American time, his flowing locks hair. And I said, hey man, Todd Rogers is a friend. He said that you might be willing to do an interview that you might know about our film. He said, yeah, absolutely, I'd love to be interviewed. Can we do it right now and in front of that Donkey Kong machine? Well, I guess, Billy Mitchell.
Can we?
Can we? Lead the way. And then he gave me a bottle of hot sauce. But yeah, it was completely unplanned. So just going with it, taking the chance, and not questioning it. Again, don't let the obstacles get in the way. I made my flight.
What was the hardest scene to cut from the film?
A bunch of stuff. Mainly the stuff with
Not an
Jay.
answer, Rob.
Yeah, well, I'm about to go into it, Mr. Stanway. The stuff with Jay stressing about the purchases he's made. Specifically, we asked Jay to start from scratch regardless of the games in his current collection. So there's a freak out moment where he's buying games that he has at home, and it's like draining his brain to make those purchases because some of the games he has at home are very significant. So again, showcasing that, but in an entertaining way, was hard to pull from the movie because it's a real thing in the challenge that we set up.
What has been the hardest thing about the film being completed? What's the hardest thing for you now that the film's done?
The looming idea that we don't get to keep promoting and what life is like after the film is done, with this void of time and space in front of us where we're not on the road talking to awesome people like the ones that decided to join us, not showing it to people and having them be surprised with the story that we're telling. It's gonna be really disappointing not to be able to push this because this has been a 2-year endeavor for us, sharing the story and getting out there. It's hard.
It is. I'm thinking
It's
about
starting
that
to
as you're
hit you.
saying it. It
You
really
were
is.
saying that you're not sure when this is going to hit you, that this is over, and today it's starting to sink in.
We did a podcast last night where we were talking about it, and it really hadn't hit me yet. And all through today, it's been like I don't know, shoulders slumping a little bit, and I'm kind of like, oh yeah,
Got to get back to reality.
I'm not going to be talking to strange people in front of a microphone anymore.
You need a new
not
project.
Not that you're
Not
strange.
that you folks are strange.
You're
the other
unknown
people
to
know.
me. Yeah.
You need a new project.
Well, we've got lots of things.
Funny you should ask that.
Is that your next question?
No.
No.
So to call back to this gentleman's question though, how do you get the film out into the world once it's complete? Talk about your release plan a little bit, when you started formulating that.
It started coming again while we were still shooting. Distributors were contacting us and seeing what these people thought of the film, what they wanted to do with the film. And some people just wanted it based on Nintendo as a premise. And like, well, I'm not just going to give it to you because Nintendo's a premise. I want to know that you want it and I want to hear your plans for it. So once I started connecting with people that actually bought into the story and what was going on and actually saw the value of it, it became another group effort. It was a lot of lawyer bills. A lot of back and forth with PR and marketing to get this out there to the masses. And now we have 2 distributors, one on the international side that is shopping it to countries around the world, and one on the domestic side where it's available right now via Vimeo and NintendoQuest.com, but it'll be rolling out on iTunes and many other platforms. And it's just a lot of meetings, a lot of weird meetings, trying to get our distributors who are pros at what they do to understand how the film works and what the film's audience is. For example, they weren't going to put the film on disc. They just wanted to do digital copies. And I said, guys, this is a film about collecting. People want the real thing. The film is about prioritizing the real tangible thing and not having an erasable future, which is what we're marching to, you know? So it's hard, it's a lot of work working with people that don't come at the same thing and haven't lived with it like I have, so they don't feel the pressure and the burden of the brand that I do. They're making their 9-to-5 decisions, which I understand because I'm hired to do stuff all the time. And I don't have the passion that my clients do for what they do. And I try to get in that mindset. So it's hard to get it out there, but we're doing it.
All right, anybody want to know what's next? Do I need to ask him that question?
Yep.
Yes, you do.
Yep. What's next, Rob?
There's a lot of stuff next. I have 3 other films that are already being in works unrelated to Nintendo Quest. We just announced a documentary on He-Man and the Masters of the Universe, appropriately titled Power of Grayskull, the definitive history of He-Man and the Masters of the Universe. The Kickstarter for that will launch in January. And we have a lot of people connected with He-Man and its history, from the action figure sculptors to the mini comics artists to the voice cast, from all the different series, including She-Ra and the New Adventures of He-Man. We have the 4 Horsemen sculptors who did a lot of McFarlane toys in the 90s. We're doing the He-Man and Thundercat stuff now. I'm also working on a rockumentary about a heavy metal band from Canada called Kitty. I have a documentary coming out around Mother's Day, which is kind of my impossible journey, where I set out on the road with my brother to find out what happened to my mom, who's been missing for 25 years. So that's coming out. And as far as Nintendo Quest, we have a game in the works based on the film that should come out next year on 8-bit hardware. So you will be game hunting while playing a game, which will be a lot of fun.
And I'll just add as an aside, if anybody's familiar with the upcoming film, The New 8-Bit Heroes, Joe Granado is working on that film, is going to be the guy helping us with our game, which we're actually pretty excited about.
And in the immediate future, every week we do a podcast called GamerCast with J. Rob and Glenn. It's available on iTunes, and we do have a Patreon version that is a little bit extended. And we have the Power Tour episodes coming out, which we filmed going to every city, more or less, around North America as we brought the film to different communities. So in a week or so, you will see what it was like for Jay and I to have the world premiere in LA, us going to game stores there, talking with members of that community, and showing it for the first time and how we deal with that reaction. And then LA, Austin, Houston, Columbus, Du Bois, London, Ontario, and Portland would wrap it up. That's what's next. So not too much.
What about a sequel?
Oh yes, there's that. Depending on how Nintendo Quest does, I don't know if sequel is the right word, but we do have something planned. It is crazier, bigger, much more sprawling than Nintendo Quest is. It encompasses gaming from all eras. I don't want to say something cliche like you've never seen anything like this before, given the fact that it's stemming from what Nintendo Quest was. One man.
One impossible journey.
One quest. But it's going to be crazy.
We get a lot of people who ask, well, you're going to do Super Nintendo Quest next, do Sega Quest next, and that's too small for us. That's not
It'd
something
be
we're
too
supposed to
obvious,
do.
too small, and because of the personal story of what we've done with Nintendo Quest, it's gonna be hard to duplicate that unless all of the stakes are raised. Unless it really pushes someone like Jay into corners that he's not comfortable being in. So that's what's next. I guess I'll say thank you for participating in our panel and spending your time with us. We will have discs for sale if you don't have a copy yet at our table in there. We're near the back. And if you just want to chat with us, we'd love to talk to you guys and get to know you
That
more.
would be great. And again, just for my part, guys, again, thank you for, again, so many familiar faces who made it out to the screening, who came up and talked to us yesterday and today, bought copies of the film, continue to show their support for us. As I said, I kind of came into this after the film was filmed already, really, when it was in post. And touring around and getting a chance to talk to everybody and really bring this film to people and see the reactions to it has been, I don't want to sound cheesy, but it's been such a special experience for me. Just absolutely incredible. And folks
It's
like
changed
yourselves
us.
are part of why it's been really a life-changing thing for me.
It's changed us to see how much something we've created can affect people and
So,
push us towards the next
when
thing.
I say thank you, I just want you to understand how sincere I want to be when I say that. It really means a lot.
Cool. So thank you. Thank you, Portland Retro Gaming Expo. Thanks, Chuck Van Pelt. We appreciate it, and hopefully we'll see you guys soon with our next projects. And game on.
Game on.